Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's video is going to focus on the bloody homicide shotgun assassination of Jose and Kitty Menendez. That felony crime occurred August 20th, 1989 at the address of 722 North Elm Drive, which is just south of Sunset Boulevard, about 1.5 blocks south. And it's in a home that just, the media didn't tell you all these important details, so I'm going to tell you. It's a 6-bedroom, 9,063 square foot home with 8 bathrooms. It only has a 2-car garage. It does have a tennis court and a swimming pool. However, what the media forgot to mention is they're renting it. In other words, they don't own that house. And they've only been living in that home for about 9 months, okay? Because they really live in Calabasas, up there in Encino zip code, where Phil Hartman got murdered in Calabasas area. Well, it was Encino on Encino Boulevard, for God's sakes, in a gated home. And his third wife burned, shooting him in the head while he slept in the master bedroom. And that is also where Frank Zappa lived with Moon Unit in Encino, Valley Girl, San Fernando Valley. It's where the Peter Grossman Burn Center is located, where they allegedly took Anne Heche after her fiery car crash. That's what I always want to do with a burn victim is ignore the fact that there's an acute care hospital within 2 miles of the accident. Ignore that UCLA Medical Center is one of the most sophisticated hospitals in the United States. That's 5 miles away. Forget that. Let's go 27 miles away up past Encino to Canoga Park, where the porn capital of the United States is. And let's go to the burn unit up there. It's just by the Spawn Ranch, CBS, Disney Studios, MGM film lot for Ronald Reagan, and Gunsmoke and Bonanza and Wild Wild West. Let's take her there. Well, that's where Kitty and Jose Menendez lived for only about 3 years. They lived in Calabasas about 3 years, from 1986 until late 1988, when they rented this home in Beverly Hills. Now, there's a couple of different cover stories about why they did that. The first cover story is that Erik, the younger son, they have 2 sons, right? They have Lyle, who's 21 years old, and he's attending Princeton University. That's right, I said Princeton University, where all the CIA spooks go. Alan Dulles' older brother, John Foster Dulles. William Egan Colby is an alumnus of Princeton. Oliver Stone's son, Sean Stone, went to Princeton. Brooke Shields went to Princeton. I could go on and on. Anyway, so it turns out that Lyle Menedez was attending Princeton and playing tennis there. He's an exceptional tennis player, and he's an exceptional swimmer. As was his younger brother, Erik Menedez, who's 18 years old at the time that his parents were murdered. So again, it's very similar to the Sharon Tate Abigail Folger murders in that, one, it's in Beverly Hills, okay? Number 2, it's a violent, bloody crime scene, right? And number 3 is they're going to pin it on a 21 and an 18-year-old boys who are very young and have no military training on how to operate weapons. And also, just like the Sharon Tate, Abigail Folger, Lino LaBianca crime scene, the actual murder weapons used, weapons plural, used, were never found by police and never admitted into evidence, where in the Manson trial they admitted weapons that were not used in the crimes as evidence of a murder. In the Menendez case, they just forgot all about that because they relied on the testimony of a psychotherapist. And let me tell you, this is a psychotherapist, where the psychologist is a little bit wacky. We're going to have to do that in another show. But anyway, that's really how you've got confessions, you've got alleged confessions, You've got a chain of custody that's broken in about 20 million pieces. You've got a fraudulent psychotherapist. You've got her crazy girlfriend that's calling the Beverly Hills Police on him. Anyway, I'm just telling you, fasten your seatbelt on this one. So let's go back to the beginning because Jose Menendez, again, didn't come from out from under a rock. This guy was a made man from a young age. So his parents are middle class, but they're rather celebrity athlete status. His father was a national soccer player and extremely beloved in Cuba, who loves their soccer. And this of course, is happening. This is all going down during the Batista regime. You may remember the fascist dictator who was born Ruben Zaydivar, Rubian Zaydivar, and then he had his name changed to Fulgencio Batista. He's a military man who the CIA must have tapped him on the shoulder and said, "You're going to be a dictator." So from 1952 until January 1959, when he was overthrown by the Cuban Revolution, which featured Fidel Castro, remember him? And I can assure you, knowing what I know about the clandestine service people, is they never, just like in Iran, they never lose control of the situation, even though it's presented that way. So it looked like that Batista is being overthrown and the CIA and the corporations are losing control. But no, they're not. No, they're not, because they control Fidel Castro also. You'll notice that all those decades that went by, all those decades and all those dozens of assassinations of political leaders, from Patrice Lumumba to John Kennedy to Robert Kennedy to Martin Luther King, to Ronald Reagan getting shot by a pneumatic dart gun, to John Lennon being assassinated, to, it's a long list of the Diem brothers in Saigon being murdered by the CIA. The CIA eats its own young, okay? That should be very clear with the Sharon Tate murder. She worked for the CIA. Her father worked for the CIA. Abigail Folger's parents both worked for the CIA and the United States State Department. Both of them had State Department credentials, all right? And yet their daughter was murdered. Yet Paul Tate's daughter was murdered. Yes, they were really murdered. They really were. It wasn't a hoax. So here's the deal. Batista is being overthrown, and Fidel Castro is taking over, and Jose Menendez is 16 years old, and he has two older sisters, and he has a nationally ranked mother who's a national swimmer, and she's elected to be in the Hall of Fame, and he's got a famous soccer player father who also owns an accounting firm. And so Jose learned accounting from his father at a young age. Anyway, he flees Cuba after the revolution is successful, but before the Bay of Pigs, which you may remember, the Bay of Pigs occurs in April 19th, 1961. But before that, Jose Menendez leaves Cuba magically, mysteriously, with one of his sister's fiancés. So I don't know why his sister didn't accompany him, but somehow he gets on a boat or a plane, and there's no problem with Fidel Castro trying to stop him. So he's not like he's like all those refugees over in Miami Lakes that are scheming with Richard Nixon and the CIA for an invasion of Cuba. Jose Menendez, at age 16, just waltzes right out of there. And then he proceeds to, amazingly, miraculously, before he graduates from high school, he is awarded a scholarship at Southern Illinois University for swimming. Kind of sort of like his mother, right? Maybe based on the credentials of who his parents were, that they were great athletes in soccer and swimming. Jose Menendez gets a free scholarship for Southern Illinois University, which is in Carbondale. Okay? So if you know your Illinois geography, you should know where Carbondale is. Anyway, and then it's at that university that Jose Menendez meets a beauty queen, Mary Louise Anderson, whose father owned a air conditioning company. Now, she's 3 years older than Jose, but, you know, these Latin lovers really turn on the charm. So he charms Mary Louise Anderson, and they both graduate from Southern Illinois University. I guess Mary graduated first, right, because she's older. And then they go to... he interviews, and he gets Jose is awarded a job at Coopers & Lybrand International CPA firm, perhaps because of his connections again with his father. And because he may have some invisible hand help, don't you think? I mean, he gets out of Cuba under Fidel Castro with no problems. He gets a 4-year scholarship in Illinois with no problems. He gets a job at an international Big 8 CPA firm, Coopers & Lybrand, which is very difficult to get those jobs. I know because I got one of those jobs in San Francisco. And there were probably 200 people who didn't get the job that I somehow, I don't know how that happened, but I leapfrogged. I got the job and they didn't. That's all I can tell you. I really don't have any idea what I said in the interview. That I did an internship, so I think the internship helped because they knew what they were getting. Much to their chagrin, I might add. Anyway, so he seems like the wheels are greased with the case of the Jose Menendez because things are moving very quickly. He's only 16 years old, comes to the United States, lands on his feet, scores a swimming scholarship without having really won a lot of swimming meets. But anyway, there he is. He meets his wife right away. The woman who they get married in 1964. He arrives in the United States in 1960. The Bay of Pigs, occurs while he's attending Southern Illinois University. That's April 1961. But Jose Menendez has left a year before that. And so off they go to New York, where he takes a job with Coopers & Lybrand in New York City, where he also attends Queens College, where he gets an accounting degree, and he passes the CPA exam at age 21. All right? Now, that's impressive. Now, back in those days, in 1963, you didn't need 2 years minimum of specific types of experience. And when I say 2 years of experience, I mean 4 to 5 years, because the way that the state licensing committees work, and the way that the accounting firms don't want to let you go, because they can pay you less money if you're not licensed, right? So they prefer that you work under the supervision of someone they're already paying a higher salary to, and that way they can just sort of exploit you, which is what they did with me. It took me 4 years to get something that could have, in theory, been fast-tracked in 1 year. But it's pretty standard. It's nothing unique to me. They do it with everybody, except Jose Menendez, where he was a CPA as soon as he passed his test. I had to wait 4 additional years after I passed my test. So there you go. It's called an experience requirement in a variety of different accounting areas. All right, so they at Coopers & Lybrand, since they knew that Jose was familiar with Chicago and Illinois in general, they sent him out to a client that they had in Chicago that was called it was called the Lion Container Service Company, and he was auditing their books, and the chief financial officer was so impressed with very young, I mean, he's 21 years old, right? Jose Menendez. He's so impressed with him, he offers him the job as the controller of the company, Lion Container Service Company. So, and they're paying him $25,000 in 1963. He's being paid $25,000 at Coopers & Lybrand. Let me tell you something. That's a really high salary in 1963. Look, I was kind of top of my class, and I got offered $18,500 in 1980. Okay, in January 1980, I was offered $18,500. And here's Jose Menendez, who has same age as me. We're the same age, except the thing is that he's making $7,000 more than me. And it's 17 years before I got my paycheck. So really, he's making like 10 to 15 grand more than me. So that's unusual. I don't know anybody in the San Francisco office who made the equivalent of like $36,000 to start at age 21. So pay attention here, because what I'm going to tell you, my supposition is that Jose Menendez works for the CIA, okay? Because he's getting a higher paycheck. He's just like Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald was making $8.50 an hour for a surveillance film company in Dallas, Texas, and they gave him $5,000 of film equipment for free, comped him, and then he takes a job for $1.50 an hour in the book depository for 3.5 weeks. I don't think so. Somebody told him what to do, right? Because Lee Oswald worked for the CIA for 5 years. He worked for the CIA from when he was in the United States Marines at age 19 to where he worked on the U-2 spy plane at age 19 in Osuki, Japan. And then he was sent to New Orleans, and he was sent to Russia, to Minsk specifically, where he got free housing for the Red Cross, paid his housing bill. Got a wife whose uncle was a colonel in the KGB, comes back to Dallas, gets a nice job at a film surveillance company in film development, which is a super high security clearance, and he's making an above average salary, and he doesn't even have a high school diploma, right? And he's 23 years old, and he's making big bucks. But they set him up at age 24 to be the murderer of John Kennedy. He was being sheep-dipped. Well, I don't know if Jose Menendez was being sheep-dipped, but what I can tell you is he escaped Fidel Castro where many people couldn't. He's accompanied by his sister's fiancé. God knows what he does, right? I'm assuming he must work for the clandestine services. And then he immediately gets a 4-year scholarship at Southern Illinois University. Then he gets a $25,000 a year job in New York City for Coopers and Lybrand, passes the CPA exam, is sent to Chicago, then offered another job, which probably double the salary, to be the controller of Lion Container Company. And then within 3 years, he's only 23, 24 years old. They offer him to be the CEO president. He's not qualified to be the CEO of a container company in Chicago, but I'm just telling you, he became the CEO of Lion Container Company. So he's not handling the books anymore. He's handling the boardroom. And so anyway, within a year, he gets into a fight with the chairman of the board of the Lion Container Company, and it's decided that he should leave. So, you would think that he would need to do a job search, but oh no, he goes back to New York, where he's hired to be a chief operating officer at $500,000 a year for RCA. That's right, I said RCA, Radio Corporation of America. Spooksville, USA. It's kind of the evil twin of CBS, Columbia Broadcasting System. RCA. And he's in the RCA Entertainment, records, producers, and he begins to go out and get involved with talent, and he's making serious money in New York. So this is a fast-track situation. And he has two boys. He has Lyle, who was born in 1968, and then he has 3 years later he has Erik, who's born November 27th, 1970, and he is just making bank in New York City. Now they live in Princeton, New Jersey, right? So he's got to commute from New Jersey across to Manhattan to work in the RCA building, which I believe is there in New York City. And he begins to have affairs and cheating on his lovely wife, Kitty, Mary Louise Anderson, known by Kitty. And so he's out of town a lot, he travels a lot, and he's having affairs. That's Jose. He's charming. He's also kind of a jerk, if you get my drift. And he's smart, he's sharp, but he's impatient. And he doesn't get along with subordinates very well. Apparently doesn't get along with board members either, because he got fired from the Lion Container Service Company by getting into a dispute with the chairman. But anyway, he landed on his feet, because I would say that he got a 10 times higher salary at RCA. So they decide at RCA, after about we come up to 1986, they want to send the Menendez family out to Hollywood Way and have Jose Menendez work with the Hollywood RCA record people. Duran Duran, for example, was one of his clients, and the Eurythmics, and there's some other groups. I don't really know those groups, but groups that are probably on MTV in the 80s. Jose Menendez worked with. Again, he's a chief operating officer. Then he also moves on to Live Entertainment to be the CEO at even a higher salary. Now, the media says that at his death, he had an estate of $14 million plus a $5 million life insurance contract on his life. But I'm going to call Poppycock on that because, see, his parents, Jose Menendez's parents, weren't wealthy. They were middle class, and they were pinned down in Havana, Cuba. And number two is his wife's, Mary Louise Anderson. Her father owned an air conditioning company, which I'm sure was very successful. However, they're young. They're in their 40s. Mary Louise Kitty is 48 years old at her death. She wouldn't have inherited any money yet from her parents, and if she did, maybe she'd inherit $800,000. I think she has one or two siblings. So Jose would have zero inheritance, and even though he's making $500,000 a year for 7 years, you got to pay over $100,000 a year in income taxes, and he's sending his two boys to have tennis lessons and swimming lessons and private coaching, and he's sending them to he's living the lifestyle, living in a 9,000 square foot home in Calabasas. So I'm thinking he's only going to really be able to save about $150,000 a year for 7 years, which is $1 million. So if he's lucky, he can salt away about $1 million. So I don't know where the other $13 million that's in his estate could possibly be coming from, unless it's the invisible hand clandestine services showing some additional love to Jose Menendez. But we don't have a financial statement, we don't have a tax return, and we don't have all the sources of his money. So there's a lot of money laundering going on in the Menendez murder story, meaning that they've concealed the source and use of his money by failing to provide his medical examination report and also his tax returns and his 706 estate tax return. That's really what we want to see, his final death tax return for Mary Louise Anderson and Jose, since it's a double death scenario. The life insurance company refused to pay because this thing was a murder, and they wanted to wait until the murder could be solved before they wrote checks. And also, Erik Menedez is only 18 years old, and Lyle is 21, so they're pretty young to be handling this kind of money. So they would have to put the money in escrow or trust because they've got a lot of reasons that they don't want to pay out that life insurance to the two sons. Not because they're suspects, but because they're so young. That's the main reason. And because the parents were murdered. That's very clear. They were murdered with shotguns. Multiple shotguns. And multiple rounds of pulling the trigger. And there are shotguns that can hold 3 rounds. But there were so many pellets and bullets, and so bloody was the scene that it kind of looks like you'd have to reload. And so we're talking about a minimum of 12 rounds, minimum 12 rounds, and perhaps more than 12 rounds of shotgun blasts for two people that were sitting on the couch watching television when they were accosted. All right, so that all came down, August 20th, 1989, which is exactly 20 years and 11 days after the Sharon Tate murder, and it's 2.5 miles away, down the hill and to the east, near where Dean Martin lives. We have Jose Menendez being murdered in a rental house. Another weird thing about that rental house you should know, kind of sort of like the Cielo Drive property, I'm going to say that the CIA owns that rental house. Because guess who lived in that rental house before Jose and Kitty Menendez lived there? Well, have you heard of Michael Jackson? Have you heard of Elton John? They lived in that house. Elton John. Michael Jackson, Jacko, the king of pop. The king of pop. Elvis Presley didn't live too far away from this address. He lived at 1174 Hillcrest Road. That's over by where Dean Martin lived in the Truesdale Estates. And I didn't do the measurement on that, but I'm going to guess that Dean Martin was a half a mile and Elvis was probably another mile. So Elvis was probably within a mile and a half of this murder scene. Up on the hill on the north side of above Sunset Boulevard lived Elvis Presley in his own gated home. Second house from the end, 1174 Hillcrest Road. It's walking distance, except you remember, people, there's no sidewalks. So it's very hard to walk to see your neighbors when you could get murdered by a car. All right, so you should also know that after the murders happened, and of course the crime scene had to be cleaned up, and no more Menendez going to be living there anymore, right? So William Link, who's one of the two writers, the brains behind the Columbo detective series, which is my personal detective show in television, William Link moves into that home because I guess they were having a hard time finding someone that wanted to live into a murder house, right? So William Link volunteers to go in there. And in today's market, that's about a $62,000 a month rental. In today's dollars, it's $62,000 a month. William Link moves in there, okay, in 1993. So he moves in there within approximately 3 years after the murders. William Link of Columbo. Yeah, he moves in there, and he supposedly buys the property, except I don't think this property's for sale. William Link from Columbo, he lives there from 1993 through 2001. Okay? Remember, that's when Ashley Ellerwin gets murdered, bayoneted 47 times to death. That's about when William Link moved out of 722 North Elm Drive, Beverly Hills. Anyway, what I'm telling you is when I see Hollywood directors living in houses, like Jeffrey Franklin living in the Sharon Tate murder house, and I see Bob Saget dying by getting clobbered in the back of the head, and his boss is living on the Sharon Tate murder scene, and I see William Link, who's one of the writers of Columbo series, and he's living in the Jose and Kitty Menendez murder scene house, I got to think this is a cult ritual. Why would you want to live in a murder scene house? Why? Why would you do that? Unless you're required to do that if you want to still get paid, right? Why would Oliver Stone go pay tribute to Timothy Leary on St. Patrick's Day on a Sunday, March 17th, 1996, which is 300 feet down the hillside from where Abigail Folger was bayoneted 28 times and bled out on the lawn? Why would Oliver Stone go there? Why would he do that? Why would Timothy Leary live in a home 300 feet down the hillside from where Sharon Tate was murdered? Why would he do that? Unless he was required to do that as part of the cult obedience ritual. Do as you're told. People follow orders. People follow orders or people die. And that's what we got going on with this Jose Menendez case. All right, so not to belabor the point, but I'm just telling you that the Jose Menendez success story is a little bit hard to swallow. It's a little bit hard to believe that at age 45 that he could have accumulated after taxes $14 million starting from zero, and to go from age 20, 21 when he got his first legitimate job at Coopers and Lybrand for $25,000 a year, to go from age 21 to age 45, which is 24 years, to accumulate $14 million after taxes. I'm going to say, unless you worked for a hedge fund and were the nephew of a bank president, that's not going to happen. Wall Street, if you worked on Wall Street and you plugged into a hedge fund or an institutional trading money laundering facility, yeah, you could do it. It's doable, totally. If you went to Stanford, if you went to Harvard, if you went to Yale, if you were plugged in, totally possible. It could be 100 million, right? But that's not the path that Jose went. Jose went worked for RCA, and he went from accounting. He went from auditing to accounting to a controllership to then becoming a chief operating officer for RCA in both New York and in Burbank, in Studio City, and living in a 9,000 square foot home that he wants to remodel in Calabasas. And one of the cover stories was that Erik had burglarized some of the other neighbors in Calabasas, so he wanted to get out of there. But the other story was they were remodeling the home, and so they needed to move out, right? So I'm going to tend to believe that they needed to remodel the home. However, I'm not clear on why they moved to Beverly Hills, because that's actually a longer commute than Calabasas if your office is at Studio City. Now, for live entertainment, which was his latest job when he was murdered, that actually, I believe, is at the Staples Center. So it actually makes sense to be where he was in Beverly Hills. He could be over at the Staples Center real quick. I rode my bicycle over there from Coldwater Canyon, and I got over to the Staples Center, 15 minutes. And it would have been quicker, except there's a lot of stoplights. There's a lot of stoplights to go south to the Staples Center. Anyway, everybody wants to blame, of course, the murders on Lyle and Erik, but I'm not going to do that, and I still have some more work to do on that case, but this thing stinks of high heaven. This thing stinks of this. It's like a Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel. Look, if you can believe two little girls, two 21-year-old little girls, one of whom has a 9-month-old little baby boy, Susan Atkins, and she's like, 128 pounds wet, and 5'4", 5'5", and Patricia Krenwinkel 5'3", 130 pounds. Like, they're going to be able to bayonet 7 people 155 times with what? Because no murder weapon that was used was ever found. And you're going to tell me an 18-year-old and a 21-year-old had multiple shotguns and had to reload the shotguns and blow their parents' brains all over the place? Huh. Is it possible? Yeah, I mean, that's more plausible than Susan Atkins with a 9-month-old little baby chasing 5 people around the property without a perimeter team. I mean, that's impossible. That's implausible. It would take 12 to 15 soldiers to do that crime. Not to mention pacify 3 dogs and a 19-year-old pool boy and keep him doped up so he doesn't remember anything. And you get him an attorney the next day, too, so that he doesn't have to talk. So I'm calling Poppycock on the rush to judgment on this. You should know that those shotguns that murdered Jose and Kitty Menendez, they were never found. So if you're telling me that Erik Menedez, age 18, and Lyle Menedez, age 21, that they did the crime, they must be really good at disposing of murder weapons, because shotguns are pretty large. I mean, I guess OJ got rid of whatever knife he used to kill Nicole, but he was older and more experienced, and a knife is pretty small compared to minimum of 2 shotguns. Also, when the police came over and Erik was out on the lawn weeping and crying, the police did not do any forensic tests on Lyle and Erik. They didn't do any gunshot analysis. So there's no proof that Erik or Lyle had used a gun or a shotgun on August 20th, 1989. So I don't know what to tell you. The police didn't conduct any tests with Lyle or Erik. So that's a red flag, right? They did do tests on William Gerickson, and they gave him 2 polygraph tests, which they thought they failed both of them. But it didn't matter because they released him and let him go. And they released Erik and Lyle and let them go. They got rearrested in March 1990, so that's about 6 months after the murders of their parents. You should also know that they had to have 2 murder trials to get them convicted, and there's a whole rabbit hole we can go down with the judge, Stanley Weisberg, a Jewish lawyer, Superior Court judge. This guy's a real piece of work. He's like right out of Central Casting, and he reminds me of Charles Older, the hanging judge for Charlie Manson. He's a little bit more even-tempered, but anyway, he allowed cameras in the courtroom on the first trial, which resulted in hung juries, because each of the boys had their own 12-person juries. They both hung up. So then they retried him 3 years later, and in 1996 they got convicted for the murders of their parents and given life imprisonment, where they sent Lyle to where Charlie Watson is, up in Ione near Sacramento, Mule Creek Prison. That's also, you should know, not only where Charlie Watson is located, but John Lindley Frazier. John Lindley Frazier, who's the guy living in the creek bed at age 24, who was convicted of murdering Dr. Victor Ota, age 46, and his 43-year-old wife, Virginia, and his son, Taggart, age 12, and his other son, age 11, and his secretary, age 38, mother of 2 daughters, shot in the back of the heads with 38 pistols, with scarves wrapped around their eyes, dumped into the swimming pool, kill the kitty cat with a 22, throw the kitty cat in the pool, type up a manifesto on a typewriter, neatly fold it, put it in the windshield blade of the red Rolls Royce. Red Rolls Royce. I've only seen a red Rolls Royce one time, in a Columbo. Yeah, I saw it in a William Link Columbo with Robert Conrad from Wild Wild West. He played Milo Janis, who was selling franchises for his Milo Janis fitness centers. And Milo Janis drove a red Rolls Royce. In that Columbo was produced in 1974, right? Which is 4 years after the Victor Ota murder. And then the murderer drove the red Rolls Royce to the bottom of the driveway and parked it at an angle to block the fire department. Then drove his wife's car, Virginia, the Lincoln Continental, which is also an expensive car, and parked that at an angle, throw the keys in the bushes, and then set a structured fire to burn down the Frank Lloyd Wright house. And they blame that on John Lindley Frazier, who was given life imprisonment and sent to Mule Creek Prison near Sacramento in Ione with Charlie Watson, with Lyle Menendez. So again, I'm going to say that's a red flag. Why would you take... Is that a scapegoat prison? Is that a prison for scapegoats? Because I don't believe John Lindley Frazier murdered any of the Ota family at all. Or Dorothy Cadwallader. No way. No way one person could do that crime. That's going to take at least 12 guys to do that crime. And Charlie Watson with a bum knee at age 23. No way. And again, no murder weapon found in the Victor Ota case. They never found the 22. They never found the 38. They found a 45, but again, not used in the crime. So where's the murder weapons? John Lindley Frazier, convicted with no murder weapon. Charles Watson, convicted with no murder weapon. Lyle Menendez, convicted and given life imprisonment for murdering his parents. No murder weapon. So those three have one thing in common. There was no murder weapons found. And they're all in the same California State Prison facility in Ione called Mule Creek. I haven't been in there, but I've been by it. I've seen the concertina wire. It's kind of creepy because it's a beautiful place, except for that prison. Prisons creep me out. All right, that's enough for tonight. I just want you to know that the Jose Menendez family did not live at the 722 Elm Street. That was a rental. It was temporary. They were going to move back to the Calabasas home when the remodeling was done. And the other thing that you should know is that Lyle was busted for plagiarism at Princeton, so he was actually on double secret probation. That's why he was home. And that the alibi given was that Erik and Lyle were going to go see the Batman movie. And also they were going to, after the Batman movie, they were going to see a festival in Santa Monica at a concert hall there, which is like the best of LA. Festival in Santa Monica, and they came home to discover their parents were murdered, and they called the police, and the rest is history. They were not convicted until 1996. So it took 7 years to get them convicted. It's kind of like the Jeffrey McDonald case. It took 9 years to get him convicted after he initially was acquitted. Then they retried him. Okay, so chew on that. Put that in your pipe and smoke it, and we'll get back. These Beverly Hills homicides are really something else. I had no idea there were so many. Again, this happened when I was really busy and distracted in my career, so of course I didn't know all the details. We'll get into the judge and Leslie Abramson, that frizzy-haired, crazy defense lawyer, and we'll talk about the psychologist. We'll talk about him another time. What an unethical, crazy man he was. And we had a crazy psychologist, if you remember, with Abigail Folger, who undoubtedly shared her personal sessions with, I believe, a CIA control officer. I believe the exact same thing happened with both Lyle and Erik Menedez. Erik was seeing a psychologist, psychotherapist, before his parents were killed because of the burglaries in Calabasas. So that's how he was introduced to the psychologist. And then that carried through when his parents were murdered. He continued to see the psychologist and allegedly confessed. And the psychologist allegedly has it on tape. And then he tells his girlfriend, who he wants to impress, and then they get into a hissy fit. And the girlfriend goes to the Beverly Hills Police and tells him that he's a stalker psychologist and that his patients murdered the Menendez family. And that's how the district attorney allegedly decided to, I mean, this is the kind of flimsy evidence that they're going to use a psychologist girlfriend to testify that the psychologist boyfriend, who broke his professional ethics, that he said they did it. They murdered their parents. I mean, that's what you got, because you have no murder weapon, right? So we just have to come up with a good cover story to pin the murders. You're describing the Manson case. You're describing the Dr. Victor Ota case, right? Those are all California mass homicides, and they all involve poppycock cover stories. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye.